The sudden cancellation. The suitcases sat by the front door like faithful sentinels, packed with flowing sundresses, delicate sandals, and the honeymoon lingerie I'd spent weeks selecting. Every detail of our Greek islands getaway had been meticulously planned, from the clifftop suite in Santorini overlooking the Aegean Sea to the private yacht excursion through the Cyclades. After 18 months of engagement and a wedding that had drained our savings account, this 2-week escape to paradise felt like the reward we'd both earned. I checked my watch for the 100th time. Our flight to Athens departed in 4 hours, and Marcus still hadn't returned from his quick errand to pick up the duty-free perfume he'd forgotten to buy for his mother. The morning had started perfectly. Breakfast on our apartment balcony, final packing checks, and excited chatter about snorkeling in crystal-clear waters. But as the minutes ticked by, an uncomfortable knot formed in my stomach. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Nina. "Safe travels, newlywed. Send pics of that infinity pool ASAP." I smiled despite my growing anxiety. Nina had been my rock throughout the wedding planning chaos, talking me down from at least a dozen bridesmaid dress emergencies and venue disasters. She'd been more excited about this honeymoon than anyone except me. The front door finally opened, and Marcus walked in empty-handed, his face pale and drawn. Instead of the excited grin I expected, he looked like someone had delivered devastating news. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and he kept checking his phone with nervous, jerky movements. "Where's the perfume?" I asked, though something in his expression told me this conversation wasn't going to be about forgotten gifts. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was about to say something I wouldn't like. "Violet, we need to talk. Something's come up with my family. My uncle had a heart attack this morning, and they're saying it doesn't look good. My mum is completely falling apart, and my dad needs me to help coordinate everything with the hospital. And the extended family flying in." The words hit me like ice water. I'd met his Uncle Robert exactly twice, once at our engagement party where he'd made inappropriate jokes about marriage, and once at the wedding where he'd spent most of the reception complaining about the salmon. But family was family, and I immediately felt guilty for my initial disappointment. "Oh my God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. Of course we need to postpone the trip. Let me call the airline and see what we can do about changing our flights." But Marcus shook his head quickly, too quickly. "No, you should go. You've been looking forward to this for months, and all the reservations are non-refundable anyway. It would be a waste for both of us to miss it. Besides, you know how my family gets during my crises. It's going to be all crying and arguing and hospital waiting rooms. You'd be miserable." I stared at him, confusion replacing my sympathy. "Marcus, it's our honeymoon. The whole point is that we're together. I can't imagine lying on some beach in Santorini while you're dealing with a family emergency. What kind of wife would that make me?" "A practical one," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His phone buzzed again, and I watched him glance at it with the same nervous energy he'd shown all morning. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. That's when I noticed the text notification on his screen. Before he quickly flipped the phone face down, the preview had shown a woman's name, Cassandra, followed by heart emojis, and the words, "Can't wait for tonight." My blood turned to ice as puzzle pieces began clicking into place in my mind. "Who's Cassandra?" I asked quietly. Marcus's face went completely white. "What? Nobody. Just someone from work. Look, Violet, we really need to get you to the airport if you're going to make this flight." But I wasn't moving. Not until I understood why my husband of 5 days was so eager to send me away to paradise alone, and why a woman named Cassandra couldn't wait for tonight while his uncle was supposedly dying in a hospital bed. The fairy tale was beginning to crack, and I had a terrible feeling that what lay underneath was going to shatter my world completely. The devastating discovery. The next morning, I sat in my cousin James's cluttered detective office, clutching a coffee cup like a lifeline. James Crawford had been solving mysteries since we were kids, and now as a private investigator, he had access to resources I could never imagine. His weathered face showed concern as I explained Marcus's sudden change of behavior and the mysterious Cassandra. "I need to know the truth before I decide what to do," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If I'm wrong, I'll feel terrible for doubting him during a family crisis. But if I'm right—" James leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same intensity he'd once used to figure out who'd been stealing lunch money in elementary school. "Violet, in my experience, when someone's gut tells them something's wrong, they're usually right. Give me 48 hours. Those 2 days felt like an eternity. I called in sick to my job at the marketing firm, telling my boss I had food poisoning from the wedding reception. Nina brought me soup and tissues, sitting with me as I oscillated between hope that I was being paranoid and dread that my worst fears were true. Marcus texted sporadically with updates about his uncle's condition, but something about the messages felt rehearsed and hollow. When James called and asked me to come back to his office, I knew from his tone that my world was about to implode. He had printouts spread across his desk like evidence in a murder case, which in a way they were, evidence of the murder of my marriage. "Cassandra Brooks," he began, sliding a photo across the desk. "She's a wedding planner who's been working with Marcus for the past 8 months, the same timeline as your engagement." I stared at the image of a stunning brunette with emerald eyes and a perfect smile. She looked like everything I wasn't, sophisticated, polished, the kind of woman who belonged in magazine spreads rather than small-town coffee shops. "They've been meeting regularly," James continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, even couples cooking classes. The credit card records show a pattern that goes back long before your wedding. Marcus has been living a double life." The room started spinning as James showed me hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and even charges for jewelry I'd never seen. But the worst revelation was yet to come. He pulled out printed screenshots from social media accounts. "This morning, while you've been grieving your marriage, Cassandra posted these to her private Instagram account. A mutual friend gave me access." The photos showed Marcus and Cassandra at a luxury mountain resort, the same dates we should have been in Greece. They were feeding each other strawberries, sharing champagne in a hot tub, looking at each other with the kind of passion I'd thought was reserved for me. The final photo showed them in matching bathrobes with the caption, "Perfect romantic getaway with my favorite person. Some secrets are worth keeping." I felt physically sick as the full scope of the betrayal hit me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated deception. Marcus had planned to spend our honeymoon dates with another woman while sending me away alone. He'd looked me in the eye on our wedding day, promised to forsake all others, then immediately planned to break that vow. "There's more," James said quietly. "I found emails between them discussing their future together. Violet, she helped plan your wedding while sleeping with your groom. She knows details about your relationship, your insecurities, even your honeymoon plans. This has been a long-term emotional affair that turned physical months ago." I stared at the evidence until the papers blurred through my tears. My marriage wasn't just over. It had been a lie from the beginning. Marcus had used me as a cover while building a real relationship with someone else. The man I'd thought I knew didn't exist. "What do I do now?" I whispered. James reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "You take back your power. You don't let them win." The solo journey begins. 24 hours later, I stood on the deck of a ferry cutting through the brilliant blue waters of the Aegean Sea, salt spray misting my face, and the Mediterranean sun warming my shoulders. The decision to take the honeymoon trip alone had felt impossible until Nina literally drove me to the airport and walked me to the gate. "You're not running away," she'd said firmly. "You're running toward the life you deserve." The journey to Santorini had been a blur of tears, airline pretzels, and the strange liberation that comes with doing something completely terrifying. Now, watching the dramatic cliffs of the island rise from the sea like something from a postcard, I felt the first stirring of something other than heartbreak. It might have been hope. Captain Dmitri Kostas, a weathered man with kind eyes and laugh lines, approached me at the ferry rail. "First time to Santorini?" he asked in accented English, noticing my mixture of wonder and sadness. "Yes, though not quite how I planned it," I admitted, then found myself telling this stranger about my situation. There was something about the vastness of the ocean that made confession feel natural. Dmitri nodded thoughtfully. "The sea teaches us that storms pass, but the journey continues. My wife left me for her dentist 15 years ago. I thought my life was over. But look, I get to show people paradise every day. Sometimes the path we didn't choose becomes the path that saves us." His words stayed with me as I checked into the boutique hotel perched on the Caldera rim. The suite Marcus and I were supposed to share overlooked the famous Santorini sunset, with an infinity pool that seemed to blend seamlessly with the sea beyond. It should have felt lonely, but instead it felt like possibility. Elena Papadakis, the hotel manager, greeted me personally. When she noticed I was traveling alone, an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and warm brown eyes, she had the kind of presence that immediately put people at ease. "Are you here for work or pleasure?" she asked as she showed me to my room. "Healing," I said honestly, surprised by my own candor. Elena paused in the hallway and really looked at me. "Ah, a fellow survivor. Come, let me show you the best spot to watch the sunset. And tomorrow, if you're interested, I know some places the tour groups never find." That evening, Elena joined me on my private terrace as the sky exploded into shades of gold, pink and purple. She brought local wine and shared her own story, how her husband had gambled away their family restaurant and disappeared, leaving her with 2 young children and crushing debt. "I thought I would die from the shame," she said, sipping her wine as the sun melted into the horizon. "In Greek culture, a woman alone is pitied, but I rebuilt everything myself. This hotel, my children's education, my pride. The man who broke my heart gave me the greatest gift. He showed me that I was stronger than I ever knew." I felt tears on my cheeks, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of devastation. "How do you trust anyone again after betrayal? Like that?" "You learn to trust yourself first," Elena replied. "When you know your own worth, other people's actions cannot diminish it. Your husband's betrayal says nothing about you and everything about his character." Over the next few days, Elena became my unofficial guide to healing. She took me to hidden beaches where I could scream at the waves until my throat was raw. She introduced me to her friend Maria, a widow who ran a small pottery studio where I learned to shape clay with my hands and found meditation in the rhythm of the wheel. "Creation after destruction," Maria said, watching me center my first wobbly bowl. "This is how we rebuild ourselves." I began each day with sunrise yoga on my balcony, feeling strength return to my body as my heart slowly began to mend. I explored ancient ruins, imagining the countless generations of women who had survived heartbreak and found ways to thrive. I ate fresh seafood and drank local wine without having to consider anyone else's preferences. For the first time in years, I was listening to my own voice, making choices based on what brought me joy rather than what would make someone else happy. The woman who had boarded that plane, broken and betrayed, was slowly transforming into someone I was beginning to recognize and even like. The perfect revenge. 3 weeks after I was supposed to return from my honeymoon, I stood in the arrivals hall at Los Angeles International Airport, tanned and glowing with a confidence I'd never possessed before. Adrian stood beside me, taking in his first glimpse of America with the same wonder I'd felt seeing Santorini. We'd decided together that he would come back with me for a few months to explore both the country and our relationship without the pressure of vacation romance. Nina screamed when she saw us, running through the crowd to envelop me in a hug that nearly knocked us both over. "You look incredible," she said, holding me at arm's length to study the transformation. "And who is this gorgeous man?" Adrian charmed her immediately with his easy smile and genuine interest in hearing about my life in California. As we drove home, Nina filled me in on the drama I'd missed. Apparently, Marcus's carefully constructed lies had begun unraveling almost immediately after I left. "Cassandra posted those resort photos publicly by mistake," Nina explained, barely containing her glee. "She meant to share them with her private story, but hit the wrong button. Your wedding guests saw everything. The comments were brutal." I felt a mixture of vindication and pity. Part of me had hoped to return home quietly, to handle the divorce with dignity and minimal drama. But another part of me, the part that had learned to paint her feelings and scream at the ocean waves, was satisfied that the truth had come out without any effort on my part. The next surprise came when we pulled up to my apartment building. A familiar car sat in the parking lot, Marcus's BMW, now looking somehow smaller and less impressive than I remembered. "He's been staying at his parents' house," Nina said. "His dad is furious about the scandal, and his mom keeps calling me asking if you'll talk to him. Apparently he's been devastated since people found out about Cassandra." Adrian took my hand as we walked toward the building. "You don't have to see him if you're not ready," he said quietly, but I was ready. The woman who had left 3 weeks ago might have crumbled at the sight of her cheating husband, but this version of me felt nothing but curiosity about what he could possibly have to say. Marcus was waiting by my apartment door, and the sight of him was jarring. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same wrinkled shirt he'd probably slept in. When he saw Adrian, his face cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like defeat. "Violet, we need to talk," he said, ignoring Adrian completely. "I made a terrible mistake. Cassandra meant nothing to me. It was just a stupid midlife crisis or something. I want to work this out." I studied the man I'd once loved, feeling nothing but a distant sort of sympathy. "Marcus, there's nothing to work out. You chose someone else. Now I've chosen myself." "But we're married," he said desperately. "We took vows. You can't just throw away 5 years because I made one mistake." Adrian stepped forward slightly, not threatening, but protective. "One mistake?" His accent made the word sound even more incredulous. "My friend, you planned a romantic getaway with another woman during your honeymoon. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Marcus's face reddened, and for a moment I saw the anger that had probably been lurking beneath his charm all along. "Who is this guy, Violet? You've been gone 3 weeks and you're already with someone else. What does that say about your commitment to our marriage?" The hypocrisy was so stunning that I actually laughed. It says that I learned to value myself enough to recognize genuine affection when I see it, something I clearly couldn't do before. Over the following weeks, the divorce proceedings moved quickly. Marcus had no leverage. The evidence of his affair was public, and I wanted nothing from him except my freedom. The apartment had been his before we married. The car was in his name, and I'd kept my own bank account. Walking away was surprisingly easy when you had nothing left to lose. The real surprise came when Adrian and I decided to open a gallery together. His paintings of the Greek islands paired beautifully with local artists' work, and my background in marketing proved invaluable in building our client base. We found a charming space in the arts district, with big windows and hardwood floors that showcased his vibrant canvases perfectly. The opening night party was everything I dreamed our wedding reception could have been: authentic, joyful, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. Nina gave a toast that made me cry happy tears. Elena flew in from Santorini with a painting she'd commissioned of our hotel, and even Captain Dmitri sent a bottle of Greek wine with a note about storms passing and new journeys beginning. As I stood in our gallery, watching Adrian explain his technique to fascinated visitors, while Sophia regaled Nina with stories of her own adventures in solo travel, I realized that Marcus had done me the greatest favor of my life. His betrayal had forced me to discover who I was when no one else was defining me. I'd learned that I was braver, stronger, and more interesting than I'd ever imagined. 6 months later, when I heard through mutual friends that Marcus and Cassandra had broken up after he'd accused her of using him for social media attention, I felt nothing but gratitude. Their relationship, built on deception and betrayal, had crumbled under the weight of its own toxicity. Meanwhile, I woke up each morning in the arms of a man who painted my portrait not because I was perfect, but because he saw beauty in my imperfections. We'd built something real on a foundation of honesty, creativity, and mutual respect. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't making Marcus suffer. It was living so fully that his absence became irrelevant.